Right.
I just wanted time to pee.
Oh, okay.
and maybe make some hot apple cider, because that's my new obsession. So
You'll have plenty of time for that.
yeah. Yep. Okay.
Whenever.
Okay. I don't have it open, and I'm not going to ad-lib it. So Ilion, don't kill me. I'm very sorry. I hope you're doing well, Ilion. Thank you for all of your help and support. Okay. Welcome to Breaking the Standard. We are closing the communication and knowledge gap for small businesses. I'm Aubrey Gainfort.
And I'm Nicole Tripodi.
And today we're going to talk about planning. So it's October 5th and the fiscal year is over. And for those of you who don't know what it looks like on the federal side, when the fiscal year ends, we have no funding. You know, a lot of our programs don't get funding for a couple of months. So I'm doing a lot of administrative stuff. So it's relatively quiet on the federal side of the house. However, I'm really curious what it looks like on Nicole's side of the house. So Nicole, like, what does it look like from a business standpoint when the fiscal year ends and a new fiscal year starts?
Well, I think there's a lot of stuff that goes on. First of all, we take a vacation. And I know you all do that sometimes too.
Yes.
Yeah, I think after the fiscal year, it's a lot of people schedule their vacations or at least a little bit of time away to take a break. But I spent pretty much the whole week last week following up on submissions that we've made. So if we've responded to a proposal and it sort of looked like something, some proposals or some requirements are really strategic, but some of them look like they're going to be awarded by the end of the fiscal year. So anything that I didn't get an award notification on by the end of the fiscal year, I'm typically sending out some emails just to ping the contracting officer and see if we can get an update on when the award is going to be made, if it hasn't been made already. And what I'm trying to do in that activity is really close out my fiscal year and start to look at what my results were. I'm looking for, how many proposals did we submit? How many awards did we get as a result, so that I can start to apply some performance metrics to what it is that we do. So I can look at what our win rate is. I can look at what our success factors are, and we can do sort of a lessons learned to say, all right, how were we successful on bidding, on our participation in the federal market, and what didn't we do so well? And that can inform how we're going to do things next year. So first things first is a little bit of sort of year-end closeout. And then after that, then I think we take our vacations and then we start planning for the next fiscal year. And Aubrey, I feel like we talk a lot about planning. There's a lot of planning that goes into a lot of what it is that we do, but I don't know about you, but I think it's one of the most critical things that we can do, both as vendors and probably on your side as well.
100% agree. I think, planning and it's required, for us. I know it's a huge component of businesses making a decision on what they're going to go for and what they're not going to go for. On our side of the house, we talked in a previous episode a little bit about APFS, Advanced Planning Forecast System. So that's the first part of our planning. Like anything for fiscal year 21 was supposed to have been in APFS for businesses to know what's coming down the pike by August, September at the latest. And so while we don't have any funding right now to actually work on anything, there is still something out there for businesses to be able to see what's happening. The other thing that we do that I don't think a lot of people realize unless you're a federal employee is we are required to have procurement planning conferences. What that means is that in November, first quarter, we actually look at everything for the entire year. And, what's new, what's not new, like, are you exercising an option on something that was previously awarded, or are you competing something brand new? So I will say that encompasses most of what we have going on, but as everybody listening to this can understand, and Nicole will laugh when I say this, is that things are very unexpected in the procurement world. So you could have something pop up last minute and you didn't know about it. And you kind of have to look at, okay, well, was this something that could have been forecasted? Or is it something that's an emergency that kind of happens last minute? Because planning I think really helps to take a lot of the, like, it's not that you're working hard, it's just you work smarter. And for us, it's like looking at what can be done and taken out of the way. Like option exercises are fairly straightforward. Recompeting a contract is a 7 to 9 month process, depending on how big the procurement is and what strategy you're going to use. So, but I know what planning looks like from our side. I am really curious what planning looks like from the private side for businesses, for those who are listening that maybe are just getting into the swing of planning or have just completed their first fiscal year with the government and are looking at what's next.
Yes, so this is when we start to get a little bit more strategic. So instead of planning like an individual bid, we start planning more for the business. Because, and I've always been engaged in the business development side of the business. And so right now is when I'm starting to ask, what are our revenue goals for next year? Because so much of what we do, I mean, sales basically is tied into the company's growth and the company's revenue. And so I'm looking at what is it that we want to do next year, and I start to plan for that. So now I spend a lot of time building out my pipeline of opportunities. So this is where, like when you guys publish new stuff on APFS or some other agencies will publish like a forecast, I'm going there and I'm looking at what the agency is planning to buy. And is there anything that I want to align myself with? I'll put that into my pipeline or my funnel. I'll also look at contracts that are expiring that I can forecast to recompete for. I'll put those into my pipeline. And I'll also go through some of the RFIs and things of that nature that have come out recently and say, okay, if this is something that the agency is going to make a purchase on, it's something that I want to know about. So all of these things I actually document. I put them into a pipeline or a funnel so that I can track them. And my goal in the beginning of the year is to build that pipeline like maybe 9 times the revenue goal. Because as you know, requirements, get canceled or the government makes a decision about about what they want to do to purchase things or not purchase things. So having a pipeline of opportunities that's fairly large allows for stuff to kind of fall off the pipeline, and I'm still got that revenue goal in mind. I'm still looking at, this is the roadmap to meet my revenue goals. So that's the really strategic planning side. The other thing that I'm really doing is getting to know my customers really well, whether it's a new customer or it's a customer that I've had. I'm always looking for any publications that they're putting out as far as strategic plans, updates to strategic plans, any of their planning documentation helps me as well. And so I'm also using this time to get to know my customer, get to know their requirements, their programs, so that I can go into some of these opportunities with a little bit more understanding and an ability to demonstrate that understanding to the customer. And I'm also, of course, within industry, we always have there's a lot of resources that talk about, what's coming down the pike for government. I think this is a really good time to go to conferences, meet people, and learn about what's coming down the pike from agencies, whether they're doing a specific outreach event or whether it's an outside vendor, a third-party vendor like GovWin that's putting together, top 10 unrestricted opportunities or something like that. So we're doing a lot of information gathering that way. And of course, it's within this calendar year, it's also becoming the holiday season. So I think the strategic planning really is, the environment for strategic planning is really favorable for contractors because we're spending more time planning out our year. Yes, we're probably still responding to some requirements and things like that, but we also have a little bit more flexibility in everything that we're doing to be able to plan and to create what our next year is going to look like. So I feel like that was quite a mouthful. I'm going to turn it over to you, Aubrey, for any questions. Otherwise, I probably could get into a little bit more details if you like.
So I guess listening to how you plan out like everything that comes out from our side, I guess I'm curious. like on average, how many of the things that we list out actually come to fruition? So that's my first question, because I have a very bad feeling that this is going to be a very poor percentage. Um, and then I guess my other question is, like when you go back and look, because I know you primarily work with government contracting, like what actually came through, and then did it like meet or exceed for your profit goals? Like, I guess I don't know what just possessed me to think about it that way, but so my first question, and I know you're laughing on mute, so everybody, she's laughing hysterically. I'm really afraid to ask this question, but so what is the average with which, say, I post something in September-ish time frame saying, Nicole, we have a great opportunity for a 5-year contract. This is what we're looking at. How often does it actually happen versus you put it in your pipeline to go for it, or your customers get really excited about it, and then we say, just kidding, we're taking it out?
Well, first of all, you guys never say, just kidding, we're taking it out, because you guys never communicate.
I know. Darn it. Come on, guys. Come on, people.
That's a tongue-in-cheek joke. I think about 30% of the time is kind of a good benchmark to think about from each stage of the pipeline. So I want to kind of say it like this, and this theory really comes from an article by Carl Dixon, who's a really in industry, he's a real expert when it comes to capture and proposals and responding to government requirements. So I'm going to see if I can find the article so that we can post it in the show notes. But basically, his theory is that about 30% of the requirements are requirements that are not going to actually come to fruition, and about 30% is what you can expect to win in this marketplace. Maybe a little bit less as a new vendor, but if you've got some experience under your belt. And so that's why I kind of build up that pipeline that's 9 times the revenue goal, because about 30%, it shrinks at each stage by 30%. The recompetes are things that you can put a higher percentage on, like just to break down that 30% too. If something's going to be recompeted, there's a higher likelihood that that's actually going to happen, especially if it goes into the forecast that the agency intends to make that purchase. If it's a sources sought or a request for information, if that's my lead, then it's anybody's guess, because a lot of times the government is looking for some information that's going to help them decide whether or not they even want to make that purchase or not. I guess technically it's 50-50, like either yes, it's going to come out, or no, it's not. But sometimes it feels like, I don't know, maybe 10% of the time something comes to fruition. And we really do appreciate that communication. I got a communication from a contracting officer after I did some follow-ups, and they still do plan to make this purchase for a very large, program, a large new program. And they issued their request for information, I think, probably about a year ago. And they still plan to purchase it, but obviously they got 100 or so responses back, so they have a lot of stuff to go through. Plus, for a large major program, it's sort of evolved over time. So I think they're going to end up doing some more market research on it. And this is a situation that I'm looking at, it'll probably take a couple of years for this purchase to actually come about. So I guess you could look at it and say, okay, there's a very low percentage of that it'll actually come out, but at the same time, sometimes it's just a matter of time to get the ducks in a row and to get the real understanding of what that purchase is going to look like.
I am kind of like shocked that 30%, like the way you created it, I guess it made it sound a little better, but I mean, that's really low. Like 30%, like what, it kind of has me wonder and look at, like, what are we doing? Like, I mean, what does that say, I guess, and how is that communicated? Like, my brain is just wondering. I'm thinking about potential things we can talk about in the future, but if that's all that ends up actually coming to fruition, I mean, what is the impact on businesses, and what is that saying in terms of, how innovative are we being, or are we actually having as much competition as we could? And if a company has that in their pipeline and they start to do all this pre-prep work for it, and then it doesn't come to fruition, it's like, well, screw you, government, like, so that, I mean, 30%, I'm going to try and be positive about that, guys, but that's a really low number to me. Like, I was kind of hoping you were going to at least say 50, like 30. Whew. Okay. Wow. I mean, okay. So with that 30%, I guess then, how often, like, is it like on the money, worth like what you were, because I know they give a ballpark of what they think it's going to be, and then sometimes it's usually around that, sometimes it's more, but with that 30%, like, how much of that has like either met or exceeded your your goal? Because I understand now you're building in like 9 times the amount of what you're aiming for, because we suck so much it actually coming to fruition. I'm going to preface that to a personal statement on behalf of me, Aubrey, and not as a federal employee, but I'm just like kind of flabbergasted right now. So I'm going to stop talking because I want to hear now like what that translates to in terms of money and profit for what does happen.
I think that is, I mean, that is the biggest concern that that is probably the biggest complaint. If I had to represent all industry partners right now, that's probably the biggest complaint that we have, is not having a lot of visibility into the sales cycle. And there's vendors that I'm sure are listening to this and they're like screaming at me like, Nicole, 30% was really generous. Everybody's got their own experience, right? That's why I like to forecast recompete so much, because they're a little bit more stable. And you can find out, part of what I'm doing, I guess to answer your question, I'm breaking down all the numbers from a revenue standpoint. So if I'm looking at a potential recompete of a contract, and I know that the contract was awarded in the past for $5 million, I can guess that it's very likely that contract is going to be recompeted, and that the scope is probably not going to change a whole lot. And so the value is probably not going to change a whole lot. So that goes into my pipeline, and I'm able to say, all right, I mean, let's say I'm building up a $10 million pipeline for a small organization. Then I've got, that 5 million kind of already there and I would sort of, I mean, it's actually less than 5 million because we're looking at it from an annual standpoint. So, 1.2 million per year or something like that. So I've already got that into my pipeline. And the likelihood of that being true, that coming out the way that I expected to, is a little bit higher. And so if I'm building a pipeline though that's got a whole lot of RFI requirements where there's not a whole lot of certainty, first of all, it's kind of on us a lot of times with an RFI, we don't know what the government's budget is going to be. It's typically not shared. And so it's on us to look at a request for information and sort of do our own diagnosis. Is this going to be a $2 million opportunity? Is this going to be a $100 million opportunity? We have to kind of take that technical knowledge of what we know and do some estimates or some guesses. And I'm always going to guess on the low end. Because I'm always going to assume that the RFI is going to represent like what the government really, really, really wants to happen. And then it's going to go through several cycles, and most likely it's going to get smaller and smaller and more limited. So, and so I'll put in a guesstimate. And to be honest with you, sometimes I just put no dollar value attached to those kinds of opportunities at all, because of the likelihood and the issues with kind of putting it into the pipeline and banking on it as a potential revenue stream. So it becomes a real challenge to kind of find the right balance and to be really methodical about what you put into the pipeline. But honestly, like, to circle back, this is why I like recompete so much, because you're able to get a lot of really good information and you're able to do your forecasting 100% better from a recompete versus like an RFI or sources sought notice.
I mean, that has me see, recompetes and also like just all of our forecasting in a completely different light for, what we're doing moving forward. But I'm gonna have to get over the whole 30% thing, but it's still like, I don't know, like I think that's a whole nother conversation for us to have at another time when we have more time. But I'm like, I'm gonna have so many more questions for you, Nicole. So stay tuned.
Awesome. We can definitely talk about that some more. And I even will speak in defense of the government a little bit, because I I know that if I mean, a couple weekends ago, I decided I wanted to get my carpets cleaned. And so I put out something on Yelp, kind of asking for quotes from some of the local vendors in my area. And I don't know, I decided maybe it wasn't so important. I kind of understand as a buyer, as a consumer, I understand thinking about something that you want or need or want to put into place, getting some information and then deciding that it's not something that you want to do after all. So I guess in defense of government, not that you guys shouldn't communicate with us, but in defense of government, I think that stuff like that happens all the time. So for what it's worth.
Well, we appreciate that and thank you for that, you know, additional boost. And I still think that there is something to break down further around why it's 30% and what could have it go to 50 and then to 70 and then to 90, you
We
know?
love that. And even just having more communication structures in place, I think would be hugely impactful, because it's hard on our side to get all the information that we need to understand budgets, to understand how likely a procurement is to come out. So anyways, I'm with you. I would love to talk about what we could do to get that number up a little bit more and create some more accountability for all of us.
Let's do it.
Cool. All right. Well, with that said, we'll leave that for another day. So thank you all for listening, and please email us your questions, your comments, your topic ideas to breakingthestandard@gmail.com, and then follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Breaking the Standard. Bye.
Bye.